And my call to trade unionists, but not just trade unionists, people right across the spectrum, is let's put aside some of our differences, come together and let's do the one thing they dread, which is marching together, striking together and resisting. Have a good weekend.
I'm Helen Davies and I'll be chairing this. I'm the chair of Barnet UNISON. I'll be on strike with my council workers UNISON branch on the 8th of July. And I'll be pleased to say that we'll be joining in with Bromley workers on the 8th of July and National Gallery workers on the 8th of July. This is coordination from the bottom. Quite significant disputes that are ongoing. The first one I want to bring up is the Glasgow homeless caseworkers. We've been on strike now for 14 weeks.
We work with homeless people and we're out on strike. This is week 14 and we're nowhere near a resolution. We are on strike for a regrading of our post. And all we're looking for is to be in a comparable wage with the other social care workers in Glasgow that do a similar job to ourselves. They came back and offered us, they offered us 2/3 of the post. There's 70 of us out on strike. They came back and offered us 2/3 to go back on this grade, with the rest of the people being transferred laterally or not taking on the responsibility of the post that we're in. That wasn't acceptable because we're out as 70 people and we're going back as 70 people. We're not accepting anything unless we all get it. They came back again another 4 weeks later and up to figures. However, within that they're also saying that some of our team leaders will be on that grade. So basically that's taking some of the extra posts away from us. At this point in time, we're fighting over 8 posts. We've been offered 64, we need 72. We're fighting for 8 posts. We're not really getting anywhere with them. There's been no further negotiations.
The only thing I would add to that, I'm not going to repeat what Kristen says, but the only thing I would add to that is obviously we're all here, we all know that striking matters if we're being treated in a disrespectful way for our employers. And for us, we're actually getting great strength for the fact that the Dundee porters, 9 mile porters, have actually won their strike. Now, we've been out for 14 weeks. We won their strike after 13 weeks. It's an SNP council up there. I don't know if that made any difference. But they won their strike, they got an upgrade, they got their money backdated, and that's given us great strength. I'd just like to finish and say that we're not going anywhere. Solidarity to the strikers.
I think we need to be absolutely clear the significance of the trade union bill itself. I think people have completely underestimated this government, absolutely. Tony Benn inserted into a Labour manifesto back in the 1980s that a Labour government should be about, if elected, the irreversible shift of wealth and power in favour of working people. What this government is about is the irreversible shift of wealth and power in favour of capital. And they want to use this next 5 years ruthlessly to do that. And that means wholesale privatisation of our public services, the literally deconstruction of the welfare state, suppression of wages. And to do that, as exactly as Sean has said, it's got to remove all those bastions of working class power that are standing against them. And the one organisation that has stood against and worked for working people and stood against the state over that 200 years, literally 200 years of struggle, is the trade union movement itself. So the Tories see this as the opportunity once and for all to destroy the trade union movement. This is an existential struggle for trade unionism in this country, and we need to wake up for that fact. Some trade union leaders and the TUC want to get back to some form of what they consider normalcy, negotiations as ever. This is basically trying to ensure that they target the unions that have stood up against them in this last period. Who are they? PCS, FBU, RMT. The targets are there, and that's what this legislation is aimed against. You know the introduction of the balloting thresholds that are going to be brought in. I think what they'll want to do is actually go further. And I think they'll be open up in this debate the whole ability of some unions to actually take industrial action whatsoever. We saw the way they did that amongst the POA, the prison officers, and took the right to strike away from them. I think in the debate for this bill, they'll want to push that bit further, and they'll be looking at other sectors in particular. All the emergency services and transport in particular will be on the line. There can be no doubts about what the pressure has to be in terms of the Labour Party front bench. The Labour Party has to be demanded that they oppose it lock, stock and barrel. There can be no compromises on this legislation whatsoever. At the moment, there's almost a quietude amongst trade union leaders about this particular issue. Apart from Mark and a few others, none of them seem to want to raise the issues, even within their own trade unions, to mobilise. Mark and Ian are here. Within their unions, the debate is already taking place. Mobilisations are happening. What we've got to do now is start mobilising people, both for lobbies of Parliament, demonstrations, and yes, direct action. I tell you, if you want to be effective in Parliament, follow the example of DPAC. Just storm the bloody place. So this becomes one of the major campaigns in this coming period, because again, if they take out the trade unions, they take out one of our main vehicles of protection of virtually every other campaign in this country as well. To be frank, there'll come a time, as there was in previous generations, where you just simply have to stand up and defy. In the old days, they called them... In the old days, the media used to call them wildcat strikes. Actually, what there'll be is principled strikes, and principled occupations, and principled demonstrations. And if it comes to them, they're targeting individual trade unions or trade unions, we have to demand coordinated action right the way across the movement to defend those individuals and defend those individual unions. We've got to stand up this time. We cannot allow any union or any trade union leader or the TUC to stand on the sidelines on this. This is the fight for the very existence of trade unions in this country, and we need the courage and determination and solidarity to make sure we defeat this legislation. Solidarity.
Paula Peters from DPAC were part of storming Parliament. I've seen her on so many demonstrations and meetings, and I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of what they've got to offer, actually. Anyway, so Paula is going to speak. She's going to sit down, remain seated, because she's in a bit of discomfort with her knees. Well, solidarity on behalf of everyone at DPAC at the moment, and I just want to tell you a bit, because I live in Bromley, and obviously the Bromley United striking workers are out right now, and I'd like to tell you that Bromley DPAC, who I chair, have been out on the picket lines with them the last couple of months, and as passenger transport services, day centres and libraries are services disabled people use. And we've been on the picket lines when the workers have laid down in the road to stop the buses moving out the depot, joined hands and sang austerity songs to stop people entering buildings and the libraries when the workers have been on strike. And I actually stopped in the middle of the road on my mobility scooter on one picket line and nearly got run over in the process. It's important to stand together and fight together with the workers and show solidarity with them in their fight against privatisation, with the militant strike action they've taken. And what we've shown in Bromley is by fighting together, trade union members and disabled activists, that we can build a resistance against the council's plans against privatisation. And Bromley Unite and Bromley DPAC have forged strong links against the struggle against privatisation of services. Solidarity in action really works. And I'm glad to see that Bromley Unite are going to be on strike alongside Bromley UNISON next week on the 7th and 8th of July. And Cathy and Glen, I promise you this, Bromley DPAC will be out at 7 o'clock on the picket lines with you. And DPAC, and I promise all of you this, that DPAC will support any campaign against the anti-trade union legislation. We are with you. In solidarity
voted in support of Bromley Unite Strike Action, I was asked to go to the RMT South Eastern Regional Council, as Bromley DPAC a few weeks ago, and asked to speak to Bromley RMT members about the strike action Bromley Unite took, and asked them if they could support the donation. At a few meetings I passed around a bucket and we raised over £450 for their striking workers fund. And I ask all of you today, if you possibly can, I know you've got a couple of buckets, but if you could put some money in for the Bromley striking workers as well, it'd be greatly appreciated. And for those that say in Bromley that we're not very active, well, we bloody well now are against the Tories. And Stephen Carr and Bromley Council, watch out on the 15th of July, because we'll be coming back. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of DPAC to say thank you for all the support we've received with our ILF campaign over the last few years. The ILF has seen disabled people take the fight to live independently by occupying Westminster Abbey grounds, take the government to court in the Royal Courts of Justice, lobby MPs, hold up buses in all sorts of weathers, and then on the 24th of June, DPAC carried out a direct action during a lobby of Parliament during the time of PM's questions and about the ILF, and we occupied the lobby just outside the House of Commons doors for over an hour, and two of our brothers were that close from the House of Commons doors and getting in. And it came 50 police officers came out at once and grabbed hold of disabled people in wheelchairs and were aggressive and manhandled some of them, but we, you know what, none of them gave an inch and they stayed where they were. You know, we know what we're losing: our care packages, our right to live independently, access to work support, which is having a horrendous impact on BSL users and BSL interpreters and the deaf community, and cuts to social security benefits. But you know something? No matter what the government have thrown at us in the way of nasty policies, called us by our names like scroungers, we've responded to Ian Duncan Smith and David Cameron in the last 5 years and now by getting up time and again out on the street and out on the line and hit them back again and again with our actions. We're not afraid of taking the fight to government. It's not about being brave to us, it's about we've nothing left to lose, and we're in a fight to live our lives and be equal in society with the same rights as everyone else. When we came out of Parliament with a glint in our eye, we went past the police and rolled out in the road and held up the buses. With a rolling protest, we went to Parliament Square, holding up the traffic around Parliament Square, and the police tried to stop us. We stopped the police with our wheelchairs and a big two fingers up to them, and carried on to cheers from passers-by, with fire in our bellies, shouting out no to disability cuts. We ended our protest at Stanistreet. Our fight for our rights and independent living will never be over. And I say to you tonight, Bromley Unite lay down in the roads to stop the buses and stop people entering council buildings for their workers' rights. We have sat in our wheelchairs and occupied buildings and held up traffic in the fight to live independently and for our rights. And on the 8th of July, DPAC are holding a Balls to the Budget event from 10:30, and George Osborne, watch out, DPAC are coming back for round 2. Come and join us and let's bring London to a standstill, and if we can take on Parliament and occupy, you can do it too. And you will empower others to do the same. Let's protest, strike, occupy, and be militant in the defiance of Tory rule. Remember, we are many, they are few, together we can win. Solidarity.
Our recent history tells me exactly why the Tories are targeting the trade union movement. They're targeting us because when our members were told in Blackpool at Burton's Foods they had to accept a 1.5% pay increase, and our members said, well, we're not accepting it, but we're going to ballot, and they won ballot for strike action, and the company came back and said, OK, we'll settle at 6%. That was one of the reasons why the company decided that they would ensure that they would put pressure on their political masters in Parliament to put through legislation that attacks us. That's why when the people in Tangerine, where we was trying to organise another site, When he was offered a measly pay increase, were told, accept the pay increase, you're not having the recognition agreement, and they voted for strike. And then the company came back and said, actually, we'll double the pay increase and we'll give you recognition. That was the reason why they went to their Tory paymasters and said, you've got to do something about these trade unions. And when our people in Hovis went on strike and they said 24 zero-hour contract workers before the strike, or after the strike, 24 full-time employees, that's the reason why the Tories want to target us, because they know when we come together, we stand together, we can win together, because we are a real force for change in our society and in our community. What a change that they don't want to see. What a change that they believe that they need to stop. Why? Because we believe in equality. We want to end inequality. They want to increase it. They want the race to the bottom. They want low pay. They want zero-hours contracts. They want exploitative workers. They want our community shackled, unable to defend itself. You know, the TUC this time cannot bury its head in the sand. Now, I hear sometimes people celebrate the fact that Frances O'Grady is the first woman General Secretary. And I think that's fantastic, but I don't want to remember Frances O'Grady for being the first female General Secretary. I want to remember her as being the person that said, if you don't stop allowing employers to sack our activists, like Jenny and Damien down in Bolton, like Candy Unwin, like the people from the FBU, then I'll tell you what, we're going to organise and we're going to call out a strike. That's how we're going to deal with people who continuously sack our activists. And I'll tell you another thing too, because I think this is really, really important. I don't want to do any more marches. I'm sick of marches. You know, when we needed a pay rise previously in our history, look at our history. When we needed a pay rise, we didn't have a march, we went on strike. Why? Because it brought us a victory. And that's why they're targeting our strikes. That's why they're targeting our ballots. Let's be clear. If we allow the TUC this time to bury its head in the sand, there won't be no trade union movement. So we can't allow the people who sit around the General Council to think that they can do nothing, that they can wait for another Labour government. We can't wait for another Labour government. And if we need the General Secretary of the TUC to be remembered for something, it's this. We want her to say, no more poverty. It's not acceptable for our children to live in poverty. It's not acceptable for workers to have no rights. It's not acceptable for anybody who lives in our communities or our society to have no opportunity to defend themselves. And if they want to bring their legislation forward, I hear what John says about fighting in Parliament, but I want to hear the General Secretary of the TUC this. I want to hear it say, bring your legislation, we'll meet you on the battlefield, we'll have a general strike because we're going out, we're not going to accept these changes that you want to bring in, we're going to fight it all the way. I believe if she puts that call out, then everybody will turn up and fight that fight with her. Solidarity.
I just want to try and outline what we want to try and do tonight, and that is to combine two things. One is talk about how we can launch, or be part of launching, a campaign to stop the new Tory legislation to shackle the trade unions even more than they are at this moment in time. And two, we need to combine with that, talk about how we can continue to build solidarity with those workers that are taking struggle, to build, and thus by so doing, not only making sure they win their struggles, but also build union organisation, strengthen union organisation, the need to build more reps in every single workplace. The major block facing this government, pushing through the second wave of austerity, another, £12 billion of cuts, stands trade unions. I remember a number of years ago, I was reading a paper, a document, a report, I think actually more precisely, from the IMF, which talked about the way in which they want to privatise across the world, the globe, and what stands in the way. And they talked about trade unions, and the phrase they used was, it is an institutional block to reform. And I like that phrase, which I was going to get a t-shirt made, and I'm an institutional block to reform. Ridiculous phrase, but it sums up how they see us. But workers know that what stands between them and the bullying and harassing the employer is trade union organisation, is the trade union representative inside that workplace. We're facing a 24% cut in adult education. That is 400,000 student places to go. That is over 2,000 jobs to go, in a context where over 1 million young people have no job or training whatsoever, where 15% of adults between 16 and 64 have no qualification whatsoever in this country, and they're trying to cut this back. So I think when we're fighting those cuts, 12 branches last week across London took strike action. 50% of those have succeeded in winning the idea that you can't have compulsory redundancy. Strike action does work, but of course, if we're going to be successful at building a movement against these new trade union laws and to ensure that we fight the impact of austerity in the workplace, fighting it casework by casework, college by college, workplace by workplace won't work. We can't beat austerity at an individual level. We need coordinated national action. It's hard work because of the trade union laws. Some of us on this table have done it before. We sat down, we did it in 2008 over pay, we did it again in 2011 over pensions. We can do it again. Never has there been a time, as we've heard from our first speaker about Greece, it's important that trade unionists stand up and be counted and unite and organise. Today's meeting is about discussing how best we can do that to organise a solidarity with those who are struggling here now and the future of defending trade union rights in every single workplace. Solidarity.
Very much. Can I just start by saying how brilliant it is to hear from the people who are involved in disputes at the moment, and I've got no doubt that the struggles and the disputes that you're fighting right now are just going to inspire loads more people to actually do something about the problems that they're facing in the workplace, because I genuinely think that's where it happens. People look and see what's going on around them and they take heart from that, and it gives them the confidence to be able to do something about issues that they're dealing with. And I wanted to continue the feel-good good news factor by sharing some positive news about things that are happening within the NUJ. And when I was first asked to speak, we were involved in a really difficult dispute that involved one of our most long-serving and committed activists, Phil Turner, in Rotherham. And at that time, the results of a redundancy consultation process had, surprise, surprise, come up with the conclusion that Phil was a solitary person to be picked off and to be made compulsory redundant in his workplace, the Rotherham Advertiser, where he's been a journalist, given a voice to that community for over 30 years. So it was no surprise to his colleagues that their rep and very active NUJ chapel leader had been picked off in that way. It's a very blatant case of trade union victimisation that is sadly all too prevalent, particularly in the media industry and the employers that we have to deal with. But the really brilliant news is that the consequences of the management deciding to take that action is that it sparked an enormous campaign in support of Phil and in support of the right of trade union reps to go back and do their work without being targeted and victimised as a consequence. And many of you here today played your part in that, and I'd say thank you for all that you did to stick up for Phil and to come out in support of him. It wasn't just his colleagues who voted to take strike action, and they were prepared to do that until a resolution was reached at the last minute. It was all the members of the community in Rotherham who took to the streets in a protest and a demonstration in the town. It was a huge groundswell of support throughout the trade union movement and throughout the broader NUJ, and the company was literally overwhelmed with messages and complaints and demands for action, and it made an enormous difference. And that solidarity, reaching out to Phil, made a huge difference for him, because you can be as experienced and active as you like. It's incredibly stressful when you're on the receiving end and it's you who's been picked off and it's you who's been targeted. It's a very difficult situation for any rep to face. But the consequences of that dispute was that a deal was struck, Phil's job was saved, and the chapel secured a new house agreement on the back of that campaign and that dispute as well, which is really testimony to him. And hot on the heels of that U-turn and that victory for the NUJ, journalists at NewsQuest, working on titles across South and South East London, have returned to work just on Tuesday this week after 10 days of strike action. In the case of one of the other chapels in Petswood took 2 days of strike action, and they have really played a blinder. They've returned to work today. The negotiations have been ongoing with the company whilst they've been out on strike, even though the company absolutely didn't want to engage with them whilst they were out on strike. They were forced to. And they've come back to work today, started a work to rule. So if that those negotiations don't yield the deal that the chapel are looking to secure, then there will be further industrial action, strike action on the horizon. And these strikes are over proposed redundancies and restructuring, an office closure that's the journalists working out of Petswood being forced to work out of Starbucks or local bars. They won't have an office to work out anymore, and they're not being paid any extra for that. It's taken journalists working on these titles, it's taken them going on strike for the company to even talk to them about giving the London living wage to reporters on those papers. There are trainee reporters who are part of that strike action who've only been working there for a few months, who haven't been getting paid the London living wage. And many of the journalists have taken strike action. It's the first time that they've been out on strike. It's taken an enormous amount of courage to take on a company that is a complete shitty company. NewsQuest, many of you will know, is one of the major local and regional newspaper groups in the UK. It's owned by an American firm, so this isn't a company that's ailing or doing badly. It's immensely profitable. The chief executive in the UK earns 600 grand, which looks like small beer when you look at what the boss of the American company, Gannett, trouses, which is £7 million a year. So the hard work of reporters trying to give a voice to you and your local communities and the newspapers that they write for, where they're paid rubbish wages, not even the London living wage in the case of these journalists, is all about shareholder profits back in America. And it's an example of what's so badly wrong with the ownership system of newspapers in the UK. And for far too long, this ownership structure, particularly of local and regional papers, has bled them dry. It's led to the closure of newspaper titles. It's led to journalists being forced into a position where quality is incredibly impacted as a consequence. And Andrew, our FOC, our father of the chapel from the NUJ, is here with us tonight. And I just wanted you to say the chapel played a huge blinder here. They've inspired so many of the members across the union to take action and to join the campaign that we've got going of Local News Matters. So I wanted to pay a big tribute to him for leading the chapel at this time. Because time's almost up. We want your help on that campaign, because local and regional newspapers in the UK are in a terrible period of crisis, and we need you to be telling those companies and those local titles that they matter to you, that without them it creates a democratic deficit where power and political power within your community simply aren't being held to account, because there aren't the reporters on the ground to be able to cover those issues that matter to us all, about health, about education, about disputes that are taking place in your areas. You need journalists to be able to do report on those issues and to report on them with quality reporting. And so local newspapers matter to us. They might not matter to the bean counters and the shareholders who are running these companies, but we've got to give voice to that. The other campaign that I'd like you to get behind, and you can follow and get all the details on the NUJ's website, is the campaign to defend public service broadcasting at the BBC, because this is now entering a really critical period in the run-up to charter renewal and the new licence fee settlement. And without a decent settlement, journalism at the BBC and public service broadcasting is going to be left to the mercy of its political enemies in government and to its commercial enemies in the form of the Murdochs of this world. And without a groundswell of campaign to defend public service broadcasting, it's something that will be fundamentally sacrificed, we would say, in the next 5 years without a decent settlement. So please do all you can to support that. What I would say, just following on from Mark earlier, is that it is a really difficult time at the moment. I think the challenges facing trade unions are enormous, but if you're a general secretary like me and you're having a crap day, and they happen, quite regularly and often, the biggest tonic that you can have in the world is going out on a picket line, going out and meeting members who are engaged in a fight back in their workplace, and doing what we can do to support them, to help them, to use their example to inspire other people going through similar things in the rest of the sector. And I can tell you that confidence is absolutely shifted, it's growing. There's a change taking place at the moment, and that's what's given people the confidence and the courage to take action. People have had enough, they're pissed off, they've been going through successive really difficult years, particularly in our sector. And I think the fact that Andrew and other chapels and Phil's case really gives heart to other people, and the examples of all of you are involved in disputes at the moment. So I think there's a lot of cause for positivity as well, even at this very difficult time. Do all you can to support our campaigns, and in turn we'll be looking to see how we can support you and our members can support you in your current disputes. But thank you for inviting me.
This attack on the
the right to strike is that one that many have seen coming for a long time. After 5 years of eroding workers' rights, selling off public services and making deep spending cuts to the public sector, it's little surprise that this government is now launching an attack on our means of fighting back. Strong trade unions are the cornerstone of a strong and democratic society, and strikes are the last resort for those whose rights are being violated, whose voices aren't being heard. It's absolutely vital that the left joins together to fight this. The Tories operate on a policy of divide and rule, demonising migrants, the out of work and the trade unions to take heat off their policies which have made the rich richer, the poor poorer, and robbed us of our vital public services. Scapegoating is how they won, but solidarity is how we will beat them. Because democracy isn't just about putting a cross in a box once every 5 years. It's about having a say in your workplace, having a say in your local community and your country. It's about having the power to change things when they are wrong. And it's about the right to strike is a fundamental part of that. And this is why it's so important, both within the trade union and outside of it, for us to stand in solidarity, to fight these laws. Because this is an attack on our democracy, which will end here unless we stop it.
I'm delighted to have been asked to come to the meeting, and let me say that this is a pretty uplifting meeting. And it's uplifting because I think you've got a combination of people who are in national leadership positions, but even more importantly, people from grassroots struggles. And all of the speakers so far, I think, have been really inspirational. And what I wanted to try and do to throw out for discussion, really, is some ideas about where we need to go now, which involves having to recognise just how difficult a position we're in, what's wrong with the leadership on our own side, and therefore how we can overcome that to try and make some gains. Can I start by saying, obviously, with the austerity situation, the government have recognised that the only real opposition that they have to worry about at the moment is the trade union movement and those who are prepared to campaign for a more just society. 6.5 million people in trade unions, fantastic campaigns going around all over the place, are the things they fear most. Because I think what we have to accept, and without disagreeing with any of the speeches so far, the Tories may only have a majority of 12, but a majority of 12 is more than enough on all the things they want to do to give working class people a kick in. They may well split over Europe, they may well split over this, that and the other, but they won't split over anti-union laws, and they won't split over pay freezes in the public sector. They'll have a fairly rock-solid majority. And in that sense, I start from believing that once the work we do in Parliament is going to be important, we're not going to stop any of this in Parliament. It can be used as an important platform and vehicle, but the anti-union legislation is going to go through. And therefore our job has to be, in the knowledge that it's going through, is decide how are we preparing for it and what can we do. And I think there's two component parts to that. One is the political situation and one is the industrial situation. So from my point of view, we need to say we want a realignment of those forces on the left in Britain who want to campaign against austerity in the way we have seen in continental Europe. My plea to everyone at this meeting, and those at the NSSN, and I'm going to speak to on Saturday, and everyone else, is that it is long overdue that in this country we have a proper convention of the left, of radicals across the spectrum who want to fight for a just society, and until we do it, we are not going to make the progress that we need to see. Now, the second issue, therefore, is the immediate industrial issue. Now, I've listened to all the speakers, and I want to reassure people that the TUC is on the case. I say that, and the last time I spoke at one of your meetings, I quoted TUC minutes and I got in trouble at the next meeting, but hey ho, I'll go for it again. Now, the TUC is having its first meeting, public sector unions, with the government on the 16th of July. That's 1 week after the budget. In that budget, Osborne's going to announce further pay freezes in the public sector, 100,000 job cuts in the civil service, and God knows what else. The agenda for the meeting is social partnership across the public sector, Where does it work? What are the benefits? How can we promote social partnership across the public sector? Secondly, devolution of public services. How can we build workforce, union and community voices in the process? Now, I'm not being funny like, but when we face everything we're facing, what the fuck is that about? What is that all about? Well, what it's about is a leadership of the movement, with some honourable exceptions, and you've got a lot of them here tonight, who actually don't believe we can win, who still believe that from the miners' defeat in 1984, and some of them have said it to me, the working class cannot defeat the government, and therefore all you can do is try to get the best out of it. Now, if we accept that, we will see in this country privatisation of the NHS, we will see more of a homeless problem, we will see more workers thrown on the scrap heap, and given Paula's going to speak, we're going to see an even bigger attack on the most vulnerable who need a decent social security system will be stigmatised by the government. Now, that is what's at stake, and that's why we have to build the type of movement that I know everybody here wants to see, but that we haven't succeeded in building so far. Two things I want to finish on, therefore, to suggest how I think we can start to bring that about. The first one is to recognise how inspirational all the local struggles that we're seeing are, how a victory, no matter how small it may seem, gives confidence to others so they can become bigger and more regular and more often. So the Dundee porters, the Glasgow homeless workers strikers, Barnet UNISON, our amazing people in the National Gallery are actually not only fighting to win justice, but actually to give confidence to other people. And let me say that the coordinated action that we're seeing next week goes to show what can happen when people actually want to find ways of doing things rather than reasons why they can't do things. And if what we're seeing next week was replicated nationally, we could stop austerity in its tracks. And that's what we have to do, is to link the local struggles, but to also work out a strategy how we can put more pressure on those in the trade union movement who do not want to stand up and fight and are so badly letting down their members. Now, I think that's possible. I think that the victories you've heard about tonight, and we've had our own, the Windsor Castle dispute that I keep talking about, where people in the Queen's own house got the London living wage backdated 6 months and had pay rises between 4.5% and 7.5%. That actually tell me, as a staunch Republican, if you can win in the Queen's house, by God, surely you can win anywhere. So we've got victories, we've now got to make them more national and through more cooperation and coalition. That's why the coalition of the willing, we are up for. We want to work with any union that is prepared to fight nationally. We will still make our demands on the TUC, but what I would say is if we wait for that, we're going to be waiting quite a long time. The thing that caused the pensions dispute to happen in 2011 was 6 months before, and 4 unions, the ATL, the NUT, the UCU and the PCS, called a pension strike, where most of the others were looking down their noses at us and saying you shouldn't do it. 4 unions led directly to 29 unions and 2 million people within 6 months. So we should never underestimate what local struggles can do, what fighting unions can do to bring us all together. And I'll finish really with this thought. The stakes are so high. What is at stake for every single man, woman and child in this country, from the working class and people who are deprived, have never been bigger in my lifetime. As a movement, we have failed in the last 5 years at leadership level. We haven't done enough. We can't repeat the mistake in the next 5 years. PCS is committed to be at the forefront of trying to join and lead that struggle. And my call to trade unionists, but not just trade unionists, people right across the spectrum, is let's put aside some of our differences, come together, and let's do the one thing they dread, which is marching together, striking together, and resisting. Have a good weekend.
Stevens is a UNISON member. He's in the Scottish National Party and he's one of the latest intake into Parliament. So he keeps turning up to support workers, and this time he's going to get to speak. Okay.
And I think the message we need to send out to Glasgow City Council's ruling administration is this: sort yourselves out and sort out this dispute, because these workers care about the work that they carry out. Now, we must oppose the weakening of trade union rights, not because it's a power base to be clung on to, but because the human right to free association is enshrined in international law. It's widely understood as how liberal and free a society actually is. Because the inability to stand up to exploitation of labour has a direct disproportionate effect on those who struggle the most in our society. And that translates in human terms into poverty, ill health and misery. That's a message, colleagues, that we need to have front and centre of any campaign, and I will return to that shortly. Now, I'm a newly elected MP with a mandate given to me by my constituents to fight against austerity and to stand up for social justice and equality. Now, how does that translate in practical terms in the House of Commons? Well, firstly, let's look at what's happened with the Scottish Government and the STUC. Well, they've signed a memorandum of understanding not only to fight austerity, but demands that employment law is devolved to the Scottish Parliament on trade union rights, health and safety law, and the rest of it. So that shows you that there can be a relationship with a government, and that's why we're calling for that early devolution of employment law. But in the meantime, we're faced with a fight in the Commons on the trade union bill, and it's likely that I will be the SNP MP on that committee, and I will be scrutinising every line, every dot and every comma of this flawed and undemocratic legislation. We must build a mass movement beyond the usual suspects, because I think the clear lessons in Scotland of the Yes campaign is using social media, doing things differently, empowering people, not previously politically active, giving them the power to challenge and to compare notes. Don't underestimate, colleagues, that self-organisation works, because the broad-based nature of the Yes campaign can and must be replicated, because all the polling evidence shows there is no support for further restrictions on trade union rights. And that brings me to the importance of working together and resisting an attack designed to destroy the trade union movement. Because now more than ever, colleagues, we can't all get into this game of I'm a better trade unionist or I'm a better socialist than you, because that only plays into the hands of our attackers, because that's the game that they want for us to play. We can't be having this conversation amongst ourselves, and we have to use this legislation that this ideological, vindictive Tory government will generate, and let's hope it backfires on them, and we need to use this campaign so that it does backfire on them. I'm going to work locally in this issue with trade unionists, and to use a good Glasgow expression, I'll be giving it Laldy in the House of Commons. And every time, because it's quite simple, colleagues, every time I walk into that chamber every day and I look across at those Tory benches, I get a daily reminder of why I came into politics in the first place, and I'm up for this fight. Thanks very much.
Somebody who's had to deal with victimisation on a much, much different scale of things is Dave Smith. He's going to be our next speaker. He's anti-blacklist campaigner and author of Blacklisted, and I think he's been absolutely inspiring in his campaign speech.
You know, John McDonnell talked about what's in the Queen's speech. I'm not going to scare everybody. We know they're coming, they're going to attack us. The question is, how are we going to fight back against them? That's really the question. Now, people might believe this, but generally, I'm quite a conciliatory kind of person. I quite like to do things by the procedures, and if we can sort things out by doing it through the procedures, by doing it amicably, by having an agreement, I'm all in favour of that. I haven't got a fetish about unofficial industrial action or anything like that. But when the blacklisting stuff came out, it taught us a lesson. When the blacklisting files started appearing on our doorsteps, and we found out that multinational construction companies and the police had been spying on us for decades, and then every time we applied to get a job, if you was on this list, they'd sack you. We weren't just sacked once, we were sacked again and again and again for our trade union work. When we got them files, we said, okay, we'll go through the procedures here. There's a court of laws, there's employment tribunals, there's parliament. We went to the employment tribunals. On the very first day I went to my employment tribunal against Carillion, the construction company's lawyers gave a written statement to the judge that said they admitted blacklisting me. They admitted it was their managers that put the information on my blacklist file, and the reason that they did it was because I was a trade union member who raised concerns about health and safety in the workplace. And we still lost. You know? We still lost because in the construction industry, we're not direct employees, we're all agency workers and subcontracted out, exactly what's going to infest the rest of the British economy if we let the Tories get away with it, 0 hours in plagiarisation. And because of that, we weren't protected in UK law. Well, if we haven't got any employment rights and we can't do it through the court, we decided, OK, we'll do it ourselves. And the way we did it is we closed down Oxford Street. That's what we did. We didn't close down Oxford Street once, we closed down Oxford Street 20 times. And we didn't close it down for 5 minutes, we closed it down for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time. And what happens? What happens when 300 building workers are in the middle of the road wearing hard hats? What happens when the police turn up? I'll tell you what happens. Nothing. Nothing. They are going to use all the weapons they've got against us. Restricted laws, the police, spies, argent provocateurs. All of the weapons of the state will be put against us because this is Labour versus capital. In the immortal words of Q-Tip, the time has come to push the button. Thank you.
Sotheby has just sacked a whole group of workers for protesting for their rights yesterday, which is terrible. So Barbara's going to tell us a bit more about that. And no doubt
thank you so much for having us this evening. Good afternoon. We participated yesterday in our protest regarding the contractual sick pay and backdating the wages. So we went to work this morning as usual, and we've been told by our company that the client has requested our removal from site. So they're going to send us a letter to let us know what is the next step, which is really frustrating for us because we do such a great job, and this is how we've been treated. So we are here to ask your support. Our website is info@unitedvoices.org.uk. I pass the microphone to my colleague.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first time that I give a speech to a lot of people, so I'm a bit nervous right now. Well, as my colleague said, we've been yesterday protesting in, it was a big auction, Contemporary, which made more than £130 million. And so we launched the campaign like a month ago, and 3 hours before the protest, service calling us to call off because they wanted to, they wanted to call off the protest. So we had a meeting with them, but obviously they didn't want to give us what we were asking, which was backdated the living wage to the 1st of November 2014. So we've been protesting yesterday in the main entrance, Bond Street. And obviously, as we came today at work as usual, 8 o'clock, we were stopped at the door. They asked our passes, and they said, because you were protesting yesterday, you're not allowed or you're not welcome anymore to this building. But it's really, I'm really surprised because we have a lot of support right now in the media. There's independent, there are reporters calling from different newspapers asking us, it feels really good. As my colleague said, so please, we're here to support each other, and I hope, so I would like you to support us because there is a new campaign that we're going to launch soon, and we're asking for support of everyone. Please.
Hello, hi everyone. I'm here with my two colleagues from the Look Aheads. We are, this is Ahmed and Mehdi. support workers in Brent with Look Ahead Care and Support organisation. On the 1st of May, Brent Council granted Look Ahead our contracts. We were previously with Riverside before this, because they were the lowest bidder for the contract. So 25 support workers have been 2P'd over, and the changes have sort of already started to take place, which are affecting 268 clients that we have within Brent. We're a multidisciplinary service, so this comprises of mental health, physical disability, learning disability, deaf and visual impairment, housing and floating support services. And the cuts that they're making, or have already made, include, we have houses that are contracted 24 hours support through Brent Council, which have been cut and replacing support workers with security guards who aren't really trained to sort of help people with these needs. Look Ahead also want to merge all of our services into one to cut budgets so that support workers will no longer be working in what was previously specialised fields. So this is obviously already having a big impact on our clients. They're also not recognising Unite as our union, so they're just saying we only recognise UNISON, we don't recognise Unite, so we're not listening to it at all. On top of this, we're being cut our salaries by £5,000, and with longer hours and more responsibility. So we're going to strike, hopefully. Giving notice to strike, hopefully today or tomorrow, something like this. And yeah, so we're just hopefully trying to come here to get support from everyone. Thank you for having us. And yeah, we had support from Hackney Look Ahead service already, who was striking with us, so this is really good. And they did the same thing last year. Actually, they did the same 2P with Look Ahead, because yeah, they're not great, basically.
Auntie's mandate for strike next week. And for the first time in recent memory, or in a lifetime, I've been on the underground for 20 years, and that's the first time we've got all 4 unions have decided to take the very same day the budget is announced. Right? So a perfect response to George Osborne and the Tories' plans. There's no doubt that unions are under attack. They're reps and activists all over the country, and my case as well are under victimisation, we're under attack. We've been fighting a disastrous restructuring plan through London Underground, and that's including ticket office closures, job cuts, right? And we've had industrial actions in the past, and as a consequence of it, one of the actions we took was action short of the strike. And what they've done with that is they actually stood me down for duty for following the union's instructions of refusing to do overtime. So this just shows you how vicious the bosses are. They're just attacking activists all over the place. So that's what's happened to me. I'm still fighting that. That was 10 months ago. I'm still fighting this at the moment. And it just goes to show you that that in spite of my union's reputation as a strong militant fighting union, that when we're up against corporations with their vast resources, HR, legal teams, admin and hierarchy of management, and ultimately the government backing them and the popular media publicly supporting them, right? It's a struggle for trade unions. So what's really happening is, the reality is that anti-trade union laws have been in place since Margaret Thatcher, so it's been a long time. It's been over 20 years. And it's a shame to the Labour Party as well, that after 13 years of government, they did nothing to repeal the anti-trade union laws. In fact, they actually set about objectively to encourage the decline of trade union memberships by introducing a whole range of individual rights that sought to make workers more independent from collective bargaining of their unions, to go about and make their own individual claims. But we're fighting, so we're not fighting anti-trade union laws at the moment. I'm reminded by, and I'm going to explain this, right? I'm reminded by a quote by a German poet and socialist Brecht. It's because things are the way they are, things will not remain the way they are. And what's that saying is that what we're going to approve next week, Wednesday and Thursday, when we're out on strike, all 4 unions out on strike, Barnet Union council workers, Glasgow caseworkers, we're all coming out together to prove that you can fight against the trade union bill, you can fight against austerity. You know, I'm excited about next week because we're leading the way, we're starting the fight. With our coordinated action on the underground, the transport unions are starting the process, right? This is the very start of the process. So not fighting anti-trade union laws, fighting anti-trade union laws. And we're going to fight, we're taking this fight to the government and we're going to show them, we're going to actually be out there and show what we can do when we all stand together.
Udwin has been sacked for fighting privatisation, but has got recently a very good, first of all, preliminary court judgment, which just goes to show that when you have a load of workers backing you in a huge campaign, we can make a difference.
This meeting tonight makes you realise that something different is going on since the Tories got elected, isn't it? Because if you look at, you know, there were 200,000 people on the street only, you know, the other week, but also the number of people who are striking back is, I think, is a measure of what is, that there's a tide turning on our side, as well as the onslaught coming from the government that we know what they've got in store for us. And so the first thing I'd like to do actually is to thank you and to thank Unite the Resistance, because in terms of why we are still on strike after 45 days and actually are planning to be on strike next Wednesday on July the 8th for Budget Day, but are planning to be on strike every week from now till the middle of August, when our new director takes over, and we're then hopefully going to be escalating our action if they haven't backed down before then. There's only one reason that we're still doing that, and that is, apart from the fact that Serwotka and PCS have given us backing, it's because there is a network that we have tapped into of people who have supported us and allowed us to keep fighting. And the reason why I brought my bag up here is just to show you, feel that, Helen, that is just the money I'm going home with today. And you can't, it's doing my back in, literally, carrying the money. And what that is, I mean, there are cheques in there, and there are that have come as donations from union branches, but the fact that those are coins in there shows that that money has been collected by people to keep us going. And that is also a measure of the fact that people want to see a fight back. That, you know, so just a couple of things about the dispute to bring people up to date with bits of good news. One is, and I only found this out today, not only are we going to be paid the London living wage as of the 1st of July, but it is going to be written into the contract for any future private company that takes over or is already operating in the National Gallery. And it's not just the living wage, it's actually the living wage plus our weekend allowances and the other enhancements that we get. So that obviously makes a real financial difference, but it also shows that we can win. The other bit good news is that I should have been my disciplinary appeal today to be heard by the director, who's recently knighted, Sir Nicholas Penny. The reason why I'm not is basically, the only way you can put it really is he bottled it after hearing the result of the Employment Tribunal, the interim relief the other week, which basically completely exonerated the position that PCS have taken and made it absolutely clear that this was trade union victimisation. So that's the good news, but we're talking about the attacks on trade unions, and you know, the test for us as a movement is also when things are tough. And back last December, we were due to start strike action, and the managers put in a challenge against us. We had to reballot. People know that I was sacked the day before strikes were due to start. Now, I'm really proud that our response to that was to keep on fighting, but we only did that because of the network that exists and in terms of the support that we've had. And I think if we're looking at a test for us, then I'd like to put a call out, because it's really hard to fight back if you're working for a private company working on 0 hours, for the people at Tate in PCS who are working for a private company, Wilson James. We need to support people who are fighting back in difficult circumstances, and on that basis, the people in Sotheby's, I think if you call a demonstration outside Sotheby's, if they didn't like you doing it, we should do it. You call it, we call it, we'll all be there. Because we can't let them get away with it, can we? And that's what we have to say. And, you know, we need the networks to be able to do that. We need the networks in order to be able to defy the laws. That's, if we're going to defy the law, and that's what people are talking about, we can't do that without support. So that's what we need to be building up. That's the reason for doing it. We need national action, don't we? We need a lobby of Parliament. When the anti-union laws are being debated, we need national strike action. But if we're going to force the TUC, and Mark Serwotka read out what's on their agenda this week, if we're going to force them to do that, we also have to be able to coordinate our own action. And I think it's a bloody inspiration that on Wednesday, the people who are going to be on strike on Wednesday, to be honest, we've discussed the date and fixed that date. It's people in this room who've done it. You know, that's how we've done it, from the bottom up, and we need more of that. And actually, I think it's an inspiration that the same process actually meant that we were all on the Pride March on Saturday, marching with the miners, and lesbians and gays support the miners, because we also have to say we're not going to let them divide us, black and white, gay and straight. We know that's what the government want to do, and we need to be able to challenge that. So the other thing that we need is we need more strikes. That's what we basically need. We need more strikes, and that they're scared of our resistance. We need to give them more resistance. And in terms of that then, we also need the network to make sure that we learn lessons from each other. We learned lessons from St Mungo's and from Lambeth, how they did it. You know, what do you do? How do you make sure that we don't leave people on their own, and that we link the strike action with the direct action, with the political campaigns, with social media? There's a method, actually, of the strikes that work that we need to share. And we can't let people who are... is that one working? We can't let people who want to fight back not have access to those lessons. We need to make sure that we're sharing those lessons far and wide. So there's a task for all of us to build those networks and to build the ability to do that. And I think that there's a few dates for us, because also if you look at how we have now got the TUC to call a national demonstration on the 4th of October at the Tory Party conference, we've got them to do that because we didn't wait for them, we called the 20th of June and the People's Assembly, you know, the national demonstration against austerity. That has forced them to do that. It's a really important date. There's another reason why that's an important date, because for some people who were on that demonstration, it was the first demonstration there's ever been in their life. And if we are talking about sharing a method and saying that demonstrations are a start but strike actions where we really hit them, then we need to make sure that we're building those demonstrations as big as possible and sharing. And it's been fantastic seeing people who've come to the National Gallery from those demonstrations who've then looked and said, we didn't know about strike action, and have been inspired by our strikes. So, and the other date I really would like to encourage everybody to support is next Wednesday, because we're turning it into a real day of action now, from the DPAC protest in the morning through the strike action with the tube strike topping it off at the end of the day. So that's something we can all go away and build for. And I tell you, if we do that, then we can make some of these struggles win, but we can build them to a situation where when we talk about the anti-union laws and the attacks that we're facing, we won't just be talking about defying the law, we'll actually be able to do it.